All right. Welcome to another episode of Remote Voices. We took a week off. We are back now. We've got an amazing guest. I'm going to go ahead and introduce KP from Cuppa. Tell us a little bit about yourself, what your app is, what you're working on. Yeah, what do you got, man?
Awesome. Hey there. So my name is KP. Thanks for the, thanks for having me on the show, Justin and Jordan, both of you guys. I've heard great things about Yak and excited to dive into it in a minute. So I'm one of the co-founders of Cuppa, and Cuppa is the internet's first coffee house, and it's all fully virtual. And that's the punchline. But really, what it is, it's basically a place for you to meet and connect with other makers, founders, and people working in tech, especially with the remote work. And now we're super, like distanced in the last 3 months now, and for a lot of the folks who were missing out on social connections and the serendipity of meeting somebody in the same startup hub or running across the hall and just like bumping into someone interesting who's building a product or building a app is what we were trying to recreate on the cloud. And so it's a great community. It's we launched our beta. We launched our landing page in March, and the beta came out in April. It took maybe 3 weeks, and it's been fun. Now we have about 1,500 people on the wait list, and
wow,
nice. We're trying to do it very, very carefully, not to let everybody in, because it's so easy to simply dilute the idea, especially when it's a community. So we have a pretty high bar to let get people in. But now about 300 people have access, and it's been fun watching how they interact with each other and just give value. So
awesome,
anyway, long story, short. Cuppa is kind of like a coffee shop in the cloud.
Awesome. What's your background? Are you a developer? Have you worked at startups before? I think Hunter, told me that you had a pretty cool story.
Sure. So my background's been in product all my adult life. I've graduated from Vanderbilt University like 2013. I'm dating myself, but ever since then I've always been in the product space. I was in the product teams, product manager, and building products. I was on NBA mobile app team. We launched 2017, I think, when LeBron James tweeted at us saying our new launch was broke or something, and it was like we had to pull an all-nighter because we were like, oh my god, So I've always been in the product teams, and especially customer-facing teams. So B2C is where my heart is, and I never knew how to really code. I went to school to learn how to code, but I quickly moved into hardware, and I realized that I had to make a choice multiple times. I'm sure a lot of people are thinking the same thing as a maker, as a founder. Would you spend the rest of your life learning how to code, or would you spend the rest of your life, with someone who knows how to code, but building an amazing experience and learning about how to deliver value at every encounter you get with your customers, right? And I made that choice a long time ago. I'm not going to rewrite that. So I just said, okay, I'm going to be no code. Luckily, that's a new movement now.
Yeah.
So it's worked out really well. And so to my point about iterating to learning how to do this right, I took 8 separate, shots, or you may call it bats or whatever, if it's in baseball terms. I'm from India, so maybe I should talk cricket. And 8 separate swings, and finally landed on Cuppa. And all of them went on product. Most of them went on Product Hunt. So I learned the journey of being a maker, being a founder, without ever having a breakout product before Cuppa. And so finally we're here, and we're seeing some good resonance.
And Cuppa's still technically B2C, right? Because you're not thinking of this as a collaboration platform. It's more of a place just to meet people and talk person to person.
Yeah, it's very B2C still, and I would think I would suck at B2B things. I just don't have that, DNA in me. I'm just very consumer-minded person, and so I try to stay in my lane and play to my strengths.
Well, that's cool. Awesome. Well, we're gonna bring up some tweets. Some are startup related, some are remote work related, and we're gonna chat about them. Let's see, what's this first one? We've got a chat here. Oh, this is about asynchronous work, which is great. So Alan says a distributed team spending its 4 hours of overlap mob programming will be massively more effective than a distributed team of isolated individuals that never truly collaborates, regardless of how they communicate. Both synchronous and asynchronous communication between isolated individuals is a disruption. So he's saying doesn't matter how you're communicating, it's a disruption. If you're actually collaborating, though, communication is a part of the work, and you can't do it asynchronously. So rather than thinking about sync versus async, maybe you'd be better off thinking about how it's best to actually collaborate as you work. And obviously at Yak, we're very strong on the async collaboration train. And this is very interesting. He's obviously got a very strong opinion on this. I mean, communication is so unbelievably important in remote work, and it makes or breaks kind of the entire flow of a project. And, I think I just tweeted this out a little bit ago, but one of the, main things that we talk about a lot in our product is that availability means that you're actually not working. And so you should be unavailable most of the time. How do you think about inside of like Cuppa, how do you balance your availability to do a pass by coffee shop, chat with somebody versus your ability to be focused and, in the zone? Do you think about that a lot about, you're targeting workers, obviously, not just individuals.
Right.
How do people find time to do this? Or do you expect them to stop working and go do a coffee, chat online?
Right. No, a great question. I think it's, striking that balance is really hard. I mean, I've seen so many people like tweet at me on DM and just share their stories about how they're utilizing Cuppa. And one of the productive things that came out among the stories that I've heard was when people on the weekend or something, where people actually intentionally, decided to spend 30 minutes, a day for the next 4 days, Monday through, Thursday, at a certain time, certain hour. That worked out really well because they knew that there was something to look forward to through the day, that, hey, this is my time that I'm dedicating for, just having a casual conversation. And also, it could be like most people want to just unwind, but also sometimes when you just meet someone who is very interesting, who built something really cool, that unwind time could turn into something super stimulating and it can inspire you for your next thing, right? So that's the variable reward. We talk about how it's like the ultimate slot machine. Like, when we first did the algorithm, we said, I want it to be like a slot machine where it's like every time you pull that, there is a sense of serendipity and like randomness that you don't know, it's not that you're always going to get the best, fit. So once in a while you get someone who you would never ever talk to, but there's shared interest. As long as their criteria, your criteria matches, there's a shared interest, and so you have something to bounce off of. But it may not be the same person that you chose in the beginning, right? So balance-wise, I think the ones who have benefited really well, and I try to do this a lot, is which is being intentional about my synchronous time and saying, okay, these are the parts of the day that I want to have live conversations with people, and the rest of it, leave me alone.
Yeah. I mean, I think rituals and habits have a lot to do with that. I mean, Jordan, you're in general probably the most ritualistic out of all of us. I feel like your days are, you go to the gym, you wake up, you eat breakfast, like it's all like pretty planned out. Do you think that factors into your workday at all? Do you work like that as well?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that's why this tweet is particularly interesting. So like the way that I like to do things is like reserve like, this time to this time for meetings, this time to this time for like sitting down and getting deep work done. So I think it depends a lot on like everybody's kind of unique working style. For us, again, the async is just what makes the most sense. And like Justin said, in how I am in my personal life, I think rituals do play a massive, massive part into that.
Yeah. I mean, I think the tweet is right. I think in general, communication is disruptive, but I'm not sure, I talk about this a lot in my nice online debates and arguments, is this concept of like, what do you gain by, synchronous real-time whiteboarding, right? Like there's not, you still do something and then you show it to somebody and then you do something else and you show it to somebody. Even when you're in an office together, nobody's watching you draw the line. And that's the important part of it. It's when you finish it and you step aside and you show them what you did, that's actually the part that's important to the conversation. So I don't know that I agree that he says actual collaboration can't happen asynchronous. I mean, obviously we don't agree. That's kind of the point of Yak, but I think that he's taking a misstep too far to say that it's not about the disruption. Disruption is going to happen no matter what. But if you can decide how you're disrupted and you can have something planned in advance, just like you were saying, KP, like you can have something on your calendar, you can have a focus time. I recently hunted a product on Product Hunt, Reclaim.ai. You guys should definitely check that out. I plug them all the time. They have a calendar integration that basically auto blocks time on my calendar. And their new thing that I just hunted is called Habits. And I feel like Cuppa would slide right in there, perfectly, because you could create a habit around, synchronously meeting with somebody for, coffee over the internet. But what's cool about it is that it protects my time. And I think that defense of your time is probably the most important thing that we have as 100%. Workers, is defending your own time. And yeah, I feel like this tweet is a bit of a misfire, because as long as you're able to defend your time, it's not an interruption because you've planned for it. And so like my day is broken up in a way. I'm constantly, I have this kind of stuff that we've scheduled. I've got calls with VCs. I've got calls with customers. Like there's all kinds of calls that I'm doing throughout the day. But with like Reclaim automatically plugging in my calendar, it breaks up a morning catch-up routine for me, a lunch routine, and an afternoon catch-up. And it's automatically blocked out on my calendar. And what's cool is it automatically shifts according to the other things that I've, done. So like if I have to do like a noon meeting because it's the only time I have available, it'll automatically figure that out and like move my lunch 30 minutes so that I still have that lunch. And I think, like I was talking to Emilio yesterday, like he forgets to eat a lot, and I do the same thing. Like we get so caught up that like we're not taking lunch anymore. And I think that having everything scheduled out like that, not that your whole life has to be this just like massive schedule. But...
I mean, I'm absolutely like that. Literally, I have it planned from like 8 to 8:05, do this in the morning. 8:05 to 8:10, I have that planned out. So I think the structure is absolutely. I'm
not as structured as you. I need an app like Reclaim to structure me, because I won't be structured. What's our next slide here? All right. So, dear tech companies, employees don't need ping pong tables or beer fridges at work. Employees need flexibility to do their best work and enjoy life. For instance, working remotely. This is something we talk about a lot. We talk about how office space is going to change and we're going to need fun in life. I do think it's really interesting to think that a lot of offices thought that this was like the key to having a good office environment. It's like having all these fun things. And I've always thought like they're super distracting. I don't know, KP, have you worked in an office like this? Like I've never worked in an office like this, so I don't even know. It was like the key to having a good office environment. It's like having all these fun things. And I've always thought like they're super distracting. I don't know, KP, have you worked in an office like this? Like I've never worked in an office.
That just happened.
That's special.
Well, don't hate on the ping pong, guys. I love the game. Can you guys hear me still?
Yeah, we can hear you now. There was a crazy weird echo there. My thoughts were played back to me, which was special.
Interesting. No, so well, I think what they're touching on is something deeper than just the superficial tables or beer fridges or whatever. It's this misalignment of what really means more to your employees versus what looks cool to present to VCs or to outsiders or whatever, right? The perks, the superficial perks, they all look cool, and they're like, they can pretend that we're like a cool, fun company. But I think, deep down, everybody knows you can't kid yourself for too long in any company, and especially it starts from the top down. I believe in the founders themselves on what they value the most. If they value, to your point about giving back time to people so that they can do whatever they want to do, whether it's ping pong or whatever, or it could be a side projects, right? It could be something that they want to build. I think now this is the era of side projects. In the last 2 years to, I'm guessing, the next 10 years. So, I think allowing people to have complete agency on how they want to spend their free time, and even like optimizing for it, is to me more inclusive than simply throwing out a bunch of perks here and there.
I mean, that's probably touches on your product a little bit, though, right? Is that ping pong tables might have been the way that somebody collaborates or connects with another employee, even at the same company. And if that is taken away and now we're all remote, maybe you do need something like Cuppa to kind of replace that like fun interaction that's not work related. It's, you know, it's still work buddies, but maybe it's casual.
Right.
Yeah. I think that's important. We actually, we added this the last minute here. I don't know if you saw this tweet. This was the Unsplash guys. Hunter sent this in our group chat, and like literally my only reply was stuff we need to just like keep a check on. Like it's like a great reminder and a refresher. But it's funny because at the same time, I think same day, somebody else tweeted out that complexity is what sells often. And so it's like this dichotomy of like, how do you keep your product simple? And how do you compare that to what's complex? Because complexity is what's often feature rich, right? But like, obviously, I mean, I think I have this tweet actually pulled up so I can like read into it. But he says, don't offer more, offer better, which I think is a really key thing. But when he talks about like the product at the very beginning, he said, we started with 10 stock photos, which, he says, pick a short, no jargon tagline, free, do whatever you want, high resolution photos, 10 new photos every 10 days. So that means for a whole week, like all they had was 10 photos at the very beginning. And I think oftentimes I think of our product as like, man, if I don't get this next release out in the next like 30 seconds, my users are just going to like plummet. And here they are with a whole week of like, yeah, we only got 10 photos. And, you know, their numbers were ridiculous. I think it's somewhere in this tweet. Like they had the crazy traction, man. And they're comparing it to the other site. So they had said most stock photo sites had 50 million images. They had the 10 best images that they could, you know, get. Launch day, they had 30,000 people subscribed.
Wow.
And then they hit 300,000 subscribers in a few months with no product changes. That is just like, I mean, it's testament. I think, you know, in this tweet, it says they subscribe from a Y Combinator, like a Hacker News post that went #1. I think it's testament to maybe the virality or the importance of virality in your product, having something that gets shared and then just takes off. But it proves that if the right people find it, having, you know, if your competition and you're going up against, you know, another, let's say iStock or something, an investor says like, you'll never be able to compete because they have 50 million images and you have 10. It's clearly not true, you know, as long as you're offering a better experience. You know, how do you think about this when you're building your product? You know, I think right now you said no code, so you are keeping it relatively simple. You know, what else do you do, you know, intentionally, I guess, to keep your product simple?
Well, we struggle with that a lot, you know, I think like many early stage founders. But I remember distinctly thinking, you know, we don't need to reinvent the wheel in terms of video platforms, right? I mean, there's so many cool ones. Like there's so many really amazing ones. Zoom's one, you know, you got the defaults, like you got the Google Hangouts, you know, Meets, and you got so many more now. So our first gut feeling was our CTO was like, okay, what do we do? And we almost like thought about rebuilding or recreating a video chat platform because it was, you know, he could do it and he's very talented and he loves building those kind of things. But we caught ourselves and said like, what? How can we no code the shit out of this? You know, it doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be pretty, because if people are coming to you, if it's fancy and pretty, then you're expecting, you know, a whole like a VC, you know, driven experience, right? They're expecting like a real mature product. But you never build a community with a mature product. And that's my 2 cents. You always build a community with almost a broken product, but a great intention, right? Rome gets a lot of heat from everybody. Like I studied somebody too. But to me, Rome's not meant for everybody today, right? And Instagram was like that. I remember the early days of Instagram where it was only about a bunch of professional photographers who would take like these, you know, artsy looking pictures and post on Instagram. And I never even cared to go back. I would log in like once in 2 weeks, which is crazy because I'm always keeping up with all the latest, you know, consumer apps and everything. So when Unsplash launched, I remember on day one I was there. I don't remember the Hacker News thread, but I remember the actual launch. And it was, I think it was on Twitter somewhere I discovered them. And I thought it was really cool because they only had 10. And it creates this sense. I think the playbook has to adapt based on the room, right? Based on what what the current
the current climate is. Yeah.
Right, climate is.
I mean, I think what was unique about Unsplash for me, because I remember the launch too, was they were the first stock, quote unquote, stock photo website that had photos that I liked, like that actually looked good. And it was such a pain to wade through 50 million images to find one that looked good. And they nailed the, like, these are amazing. Every single one of them is an amazing image. I mean, when I had my Android phone, I have a Resplash Android app that just like does a Unsplash photos of my wallpaper. So they're everywhere in my life. We actually just we were using the Aura Ring, the health tracker Aura Ring app the other day, and they've updated their mobile app. And Jordan and I's like first impression was they just have like Unsplash images
in the background,
and it just looks amazing. And it's just Unsplash images.
Right.
It's almost become synonymous with like a style of photo in a weird way.
Right. And also too, it's there. You know, I really am now with these numbers. I was blown away yesterday when I saw these. I was like, wow, they held out longer than I anticipated. You know, because if this was like 20,000-ish numbers, that makes sense. If they hit 300K with the same principle, which is insane to me, right? Yeah. So kudos to them, man. I mean, it's really hard to, you know, cut down on your feature scope and you know, double down on what's working. It's really hard, but this is how it tells. This is what it shows, right?
Yeah, I think, you know, Jordan, one of the things that I think is interesting is when we took clients on So Friendly, we tell them to do this all the time. And then I think at Yak, when it's your own product, you struggle a little bit more.
You definitely, you kind of get lost your own sauce because like there's no one, like you're not objective necessarily to your own thing all the time. When you're building for somebody else, you can be like, oh, hey, you know, do this or do that. When it's your own thing, you kind of like, you know, the lines get blurred a little bit.
Yeah.
It's every 2 days, I get a, you know, every couple of days, every 3 days, I get a DM from someone or an email from someone saying like, hey, we need this for a cuppa, we need that for a cuppa. This would be cool for cuppa, right? Now, in one of my first few products that I built, that would be first of all like so exciting for me, and I would take that feedback immediately and run with it, right? Without ever thinking about will this piece fit in the larger puzzle that we want to build, right? Most of the times their intentions are good, but they don't know what your roadmap's like and your focus is like, right? So they'll just keep throwing all these, you know, random nuggets of ideas, and you know, you have to acknowledge it, right? You can't be cold and be like, fuck, you know, screw you. You acknowledge it, but then you digest it and you say, okay, does it really need to be built? Because if there's no core action behind that particular, you know, feature, you don't need that, right?
Yeah, I think Superhuman does this really well. Like they just are so, they've planted their feet so strong. They just say like, that is not a feature that we're adding. Like, I appreciate your feedback, but that's not where we're going. And here's why. And I think that's tough to do. You know, conversely, we had somebody talk to Hunter the other day about the product, and they said it's just stupid that keyboard shortcut for search, you know, Command F, your typical search command, doesn't open our search bar. And I was like, yeah, like I think that's a pretty valid point actually. So we added it, right? Because it like took so little effort. But then a lot of times, probably the most frequent thing we get is, why can't I do real-time voice chat on Yak? And we're like, like, it's very easy to add that. It's technically not difficult, but that goes against our product. And that's, you know, not come from a ethos perspective, you know, where we want to be. And so we have to sometimes decide, how many people are asking for this? Is it everybody, or is it just a couple people, or the vocal minority? Or, you know, we get asked a lot about text. You know, hey, I just want to be able to send some text messages. And it's like, dude, just use Slack. And then, you know, conversely, we had VCs very early on asking, you know, why can't Slack just add voice messaging right into their UI? And, you know, we have a blog on this. Like, we've tried all the voice messaging stuff. And like, the problem is when you send a voice message through Slack, the inherent lazy response is to just reply with a text message, because that's the like easy way to do it. And then you lose out on the emotion and the tone and the high bandwidth that voice gains you. You know, there's a reason why you built Cuppa as like a video voice platform, right? Like, it's the reason it's not a giant text messaging group, because you don't build relationships that way. And so, you know, we have to be very purposeful about, you know, the stuff that we're putting in. And I don't know. I liked this. If you haven't read this the thread, go off, read it. Michael Cho. It's so worth it, because it's just a great reminder for anybody building anything that they need to keep it simple, keep the value prop as kind of like the highest, you know, point that they're looking for, and not just like bogging things down with features. I mean, even today at the state that Unsplash is at, it's still kind of its core concept. Like it still has that core feature set simplicity. All right, what's the next one? Have you seen this? Have you seen human IPOs? Is this you haven't come across this yet? I feel like I saw it on Product Hunt, so I was less surprised by this. I have their website pulled up. Human IPOs of people you believe in. Issue, trade, and redeem human equity backed by time. If you go to their website, you will notice that it is all a bunch of white people. I think some of them have black and white photos, maybe to hide that. You know, the Twitter thread around this was a little funny. They said, "What a time to launch a product where you claim you're buying people in the middle of the Black Lives Matter protest." It does seem a little tone deaf. Our token black guy, Jordan, do you want to, speak about this?
I talk with Hunter and Justin about this stuff all the time. I think this is just, I mean, I guess I get the idea, but I think it comes across in like really bad taste.
It's tone deaf. It totally is.
It really is.
I mean,
and there's even, I mean, there's other people out there. I don't want to get really into it, but like people who are disguising like marketing employees and stuff, you know, kind of behind all this craziness that's going on. So yeah, I just think it's very tone deaf and it reads kind of weird.
But I mean, I guess looking at the product itself, I'm not sure like I totally get it. So the examples they give down here at the bottom are like Tim Cook has amortized 610,000% over the last 30 years. And like their whole concept is like, this is Mike. Mike is working on something cool. He is new, so his time costs almost nothing. So the idea is like you invest in like a founder or like a developer that you think is going to make it big. You know, maybe, I don't know, maybe they're a $30,000 a year employee, and in 2 years, they're now a $90,000 a year employee. And so since you bought in early, you can have them do stuff for you at a lower rate. But how is that not just like the inherent issue of undervaluing someone's value? Like if I have worked my way towards, a certain salary or a certain hourly rate as a contractor or whatever, I want to be paid that. The fact that you invested in me early on does not entitle you to cheaper rates. Like, I don't know. I give maybe my friends or my family special rates, but like, this seems weird.
Yeah. It's
super weird. I think it's, I feel like it sounds like some of these ideas, you know, they sound like good ideas in theory, right? But when you actually see them, you examine them, you're like, it's a mess. And this is one of those classic ideas, you know?
Yeah. I think the tone that probably most bothers me coming from Florida, not being in the Silicon Valley, bucket, I guess, is that if you look at like all the people on the site, like they're all like Forbes 30 under 30s. If you look at like the Twitter thread, that's basically all it's talking is about is like, man, I'm so jealous I'm not on the list. Not like, it's the bro club. It's the,
I just don't understand generically like why you would want this. So like, sure, like bro culture, like I get it maybe, but like for like the normal worker in like South Carolina, like why would anybody?
I get why I would want to be listed on it, but
sure,
I don't know why I would want to use it.
Yeah.
That seems weird to me. Like, I'm not going to buy shares of you.
Yeah.
That's insulting to you, I think.
Yeah. That's my point. It's
super.
You can buy, other things, but yeah, it's a mess. I think it's, I'm glad it didn't come into my sphere yet.
Yeah. It's really weird. So I think, we talk about there's never a good time to ship. I would say that now is literally not the right time to ship this. Like you should have just waited a couple of weeks to announce this. It's the current state. I mean, we skipped our podcast 2 weeks in a row now.
Go back to the drawing board, folks.
We've decided not really to market new releases. We haven't done a product hunt launch in a while. Like it's just not the time.
There's just more
to launch anything
in the
general
world to focus on right now.
But certainly don't launch something where you're buying people. That's over the top. All right, what's next? Google removes TikTok clone. I don't know, Zen. Is that how you say it? Zen?
I think so.
Zen from Play Store after reports of plagiarism. Have you seen this app, KP? Oh, we lost our video.
Zen? No.
It's like a TikTok clone. I'm just gonna like turn our video off because it's like not important anymore anyway. It's a TikTok clone, but I think they pay you to post. I think that's
something like
the
that.
pitch.
Yeah.
And so you get paid for uploading content. This was clearly a well-funded startup that was gonna pay everybody to fill their empty room. I mean, every social startup has the empty room problem, right? You go into a new app and it's just empty, and so it's boring and there's no content. So I guess we'll just precede the content by paying people. So the inherent obvious thing happened. People were just uploading content that they didn't own, and so they were getting takedown requests, and so Google had to remove the app. Like, how insane is that? That you got to the point where you incentivized illegal behavior because you couldn't get users, I guess, a traditional way. I've heard of growth hacks. You look at Airbnb as being like a really early use case of this, where they would like go to other people's houses, take professional photos, and use those professional photos so that their posts look good. Why wouldn't they have just gone to creators though, and like paid creators to make content, paying users to just upload stuff? It's definitely sleazy, but I mean, clearly worked. They topped the charts, #1.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you have to draw the line for yourself, and think about the long-term plays, right? I mean, some of these things are super short-term, plays, and it saddens me that there's so much founder energy and employees' energy going into shit like this that won't last 3 months, So it's yeah.
How are you getting users?
Well, so the empty room problem, right? Luckily, we never had that problem from day one, because the size of the room was a closet, and I made sure that the room size was very small from the beginning, right? I mean, so the V1 of Cuppa, when I launched the landing page, it was just a landing page, and I wanted to see if we would get enough people to buy just with the landing page. We didn't have any product, we didn't have nothing, and we had about 250 people that weekend sign up. And I don't have a huge following on Twitter or anything, so that told me something, that there was some signal here. So we started there, and I just took a quick look at the list of people who joined, and some of these people were like, well-known people and people that I recognize, and they're smart people. So I'm like, okay, so there's some signal for sure here. It's not just a bunch of random bots on Twitter. So with that, I built the V1 completely manually. So I was the matchmaker for the first 2 weeks, because I didn't want to spend time building code solution if there was no demand, if there was no interest there. So I got my 12, 13 people, my close friends and people like makers that I respect on Twitter, and the people who would like listen to me, and got their schedules, everything together, and then built an Airtable thing where I can just look at, Sunday, Michael Novotny and Michael Gill are free at 2 p.m. So let me just send an email to each of them. So it was almost like a warm intro service that I did for the first 20 cuppas.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and it was really special because I knew them separately, right? I knew Michael Novotny, I knew like Whit Anderson, some of these names I'm just like throwing out. Shout outs to everybody; they're all my good friends, but they never knew each other. So that was a sense of joy for me too, to connect them, and because they lived in different cities. So it was so much fun, and they enjoyed it. The only ask was 30 minutes, and nothing more, and they all loved it. I mean, the thing with being around makers and founders, you probably can relate to this, is there's never, there's never like a time where it ever gets boring, because people are always building shit.
Yeah.
Even if they have a mainstream, fully funded startup, they're still building shit on the side.
And they typically support everyone else who's also building shit, which is
because they know the
cool environment. Right? Yeah.
It's very transferable. Like that feelings are very, very relatable, and so it's so amazing to them. And I knew this, like I thought this was n equals 1, n equals 10 sample size, but now we're a cup at 300, like the same feeling of togetherness, the belonging of, hey, I know how fucking hard it is to like go from an idea to landing page to a shipped product. And so I'm going to give you real feedback, or I'm going to help you when you launch. We're going to support you, whatever. That existed. So anyway, the V1 was just with those people, and it proved the theory. And then I also, with that process, I had a sort of working process like in place, which I could simply take that workflow and build a no-code solution for it, which Michael Gill, my current co-founder, helped do it. And so then we launched to 100 people. All of them ate it up because they felt like there was a special 100 to test this. And so we kept increasing the size of the room, so you never had an empty room, So that's one contrarian thing that I think, I wouldn't have done like maybe a year ago. I just learned that from my recent times here.
I got reached out to on Twitter recently by this company called Matchbox.vc.
Yeah, I know them. Yeah.
Yeah. And so they did something very similar, like super guerrilla, reach out, like, hey, we want you involved. Like, do you want to be involved? And then like their entire app or technology right now is basically like a Calendly, right? Like there's nothing crazy going on the back end. They're just facilitating those connections. And, I got matched up with a guy. We did Fortnite session together. We talked about product. It was cool. And, he followed up, later and was like, hey, how was your first Matchbox, session? Like, how was it? What do you think? I'm like, yeah, we're getting a demo of his product at the end. And he tweeted out about it. And he was like, man, this is so cool. Like 2 founders connected over Fortnite and are now getting demos of each other's products. And I think that's, I talk about this a lot in like how we talk about Yak's growth. And I think we're fortunate to have, the users that we have and the growth that we have. But a lot of people are like, man, how did you guys do this? You came out of nowhere. And it's like, dude, we were just like earnest and honest, like involved in the community for the last year, loud and proud about what we were building, chatting, people constantly. I'm in a bunch of like maker groups and like Slack channels. And I think that people respect when you are just like boots on the ground, putting your effort forward, getting involved and like putting value out into the marketplace.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing for us is just like that we just got involved, like just have the conversations, meet people, say hello, whatever, just get involved.
Right. I get that friendly vibe from, all 3 of you guys. It's something's, a lot of people complain about, a lot of people like worry about how do you like, worry about, how do you like, handle the competition and all that crap, and to me, it's almost, I look at teams like you guys, right? I always think in my head and think like, if I started Yak today, like a literal no code clone of Yak today, which is possible with all these bubble and whatnot, would I be able to replace their energy?
Drive. You can't replace us with no code. We are unique.
So that's my metric. And I think a lot of people don't understand and don't actually, appreciate their own strength that way. Right. And then they're too worried about like someone cloning them. On second day of Cuppa's launch, somebody sent me a, landing page of another company called Grab Chai, which is an Indian version of Cuppa.
Yeah, there you go.
I was like, and everybody thought, okay, this is like hell breaks loose or whatever. I didn't care for it. And I actually reached out to that maker and congratulated him on the launch. And he was blown away. He said, actually, KP, let me tell you this. I've been following you. I swear, I definitely didn't see the launch of Cuppa, which, who knows what the truth is, but I'd like to over-index on people and trust and say, you know what, maybe he never saw that. And it's okay, right?
Have you heard our crazy story about that?
No.
We built a Chrome extension called Next Up, and we're just about to launch it on Product Hunt. And so I was like getting all the assets together for this. And in the Chrome Web Store, I saw a recommended, extension called Up Next. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. So I click on it, and it's Owen Williams. He has launched the exact same product as me at the exact same time. And like I went through like both of our Twitter histories, and we had literally been working on it like day to day at the exact same times, similarly building the exact same product. And he named his Up Next, and I named mine Next Up. And I hadn't tweeted about mine at all, so I know he didn't steal it. Like it was just like a weird shared brain thing.
It happens
like we both had the same idea.
Yeah, it happens a lot, especially now, with this, like, especially with work from home, everyone's like, got this extra hour that they're not wasting on commute.
Yeah.
People are building a lot. People are thinking about the same ideas a lot, right? So, but here's the thing. I think in the long run, what stands out is how unique and how authentic you were to the room you were speaking, not even to the other room, right? So I told the guys who were, who were doing this for the Indian crowd, I said, like, I can't speak to the current Indian demographic because I'm right now in Atlanta. Please, just go ahead, march on and do what you're doing, And 3 months later, we're like completely different products now. Like if you look at the internal product, the apps itself, they're very different.
Yeah.
So I think, people, to you guys, but trying to circle back to the actual point, which is the reason I love Yak is nothing to do with the product, which is shocking. because I love product. It's got nothing to do with the product. Although as a product manager founder, I saw your journey, and I remember your launch on the product hunt and everything, but it's not meaningful to me that it's like, oh, it's it's definitely one of the products. What's meaningful to me has been your voice in the community, and all three of you do this. And I know not so much on Jordan. I don't follow him very actively, I think, but I know you're all in the same room thinking the same things, and it comes out really authentically, and that's my favorite part.
Yeah, dude, that's cool to hear. I appreciate that. I think we only have how many? We got two more.
I got to get my Twitter game up, huh?
Yeah, man, you gotta get there. We got two more tweets. So we'll cover these pretty quickly because we got to wrap up. We've gone long. I appreciate you staying with me. We'll blow through this one real quick. This is Dieter from The Verge. I'm not going to read the tweet, but basically, Android 11 beta has this new thing called voice access. And I like to bring this up just because Hunter talks a lot about how Yak is, maybe a little early, right? And the kind of thing that we think about is, what are you going to do? How are you going to communicate with people once keyboards and mice are no longer around? And we think about AR, mounted headsets, glasses, things like that. And I think that, you see Android already making this like first step. You can start to interface with the OS just by calling out buttons and menus and tabs. And, being able to use your voice or run through an OS like that may seem just like silly and ridiculous right now, but as hardware starts to advance, as interfaces start to change, we're going to need a way to communicate with the device, but also communicate with our teammates that's voice and kind of like hands-free driven. And so it's exciting to see this like first step already being, pushed into Android. And I think obviously some of the first AR headsets, I bet, are just going to be running Android on the back end. I know, even our VR headsets like the Oculus Quest are running Android. So it's cool to see this, first step from Google, from the Android team, already putting voice at a forefront, which is obviously exciting for us at Yak. I think we talked about this at the very beginning as well. Simplicity is a great virtue, but it requires hard work to achieve it and education to appreciate it. And to make matters worse, complexity sells better. I think we've talked about that a lot, this concept throughout this entire episode. And I think it was super exciting to hear your perspective on this, KP. I love that you started with a no-code approach. I think that's admirable and impressive to where you're at today. I also think in general, that complexity sells better. Maybe on the surface value, right? Like maybe on the surface, like people hear complexity and they think, wow, that's impressive. But at the end of the day, when you look at, think about Magic Leap, right?
I think that's just humans' natural instinct in general. Think about it. When you go to a gym and you see all these like fancy equipments and things like that, people are like, oh, whoa, it's really complex. This must be like a really good place to work out. And then after a little bit, you may discover it may or may not be like the best gym.
Yeah, you were talking about this today with me with your
sports
basketball.
trainer. Yeah, when I used to like coach basketball back in high school and stuff, the parents would want to see all the cones and ladders and all that fancy stuff. And they're like, wow, that must be like a really good workout. When in fact, it's like you just really need to run sprints and like generically just stay in shape. So yeah, it's weird. Complexity, I think, is what sells on the surface, but for long-term value, I think it's definitely like the simplicity and ease of use that makes something go.
Apple's a classic example on that, right? It's
for sure.
Yeah, probably the example on that.
The example, yeah. I'm a huge fan of Steve Jobs, and I'm sure you guys relate to what I'm about to say. I think Apple stands as one rare example in this sea of Fortune 100 companies that are inundated with shit that's everywhere. Like there's so much product lines and so many, multiple lines of things, but Apple is definitely an outlier, And so it's something there. And also now the world's most expensive, the highest market.
Yeah, absolutely. So it worked out, obviously. That's the way to do it. Well, dude, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, man.
Thanks for staying long.
Thank you.
Where can people connect with you? Where can people sign up for Cuppa? Give them kind of the rundown here before we go off.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me, and this is fun. I didn't realize we almost ran over. It felt like a real fun conversation.
Yeah.
So you can reach out to me. I'm very active on Twitter. So my handle is @thisiskp_. And you can reach out and join Cuppa at getcuppa.io.
Awesome. We'll put some links in the show notes when this goes live. Thank you so much for joining us, man. I'm going to pull you out and we'll kind of sign off with some music here. Thanks so much, dude.
Thanks,
Awesome.
man. Yeah.